Conservatives have had a housing market epiphany. They have realized that the housing market is rigged against ordinary working Americans. And what I love about this is that they've just discovered it. And since they've just discovered it, they think that they're the geniuses, and the left is completely oblivious about it, even though we've been discussing it for quite some time now. I begin with the Twitter thread in question, which embeds an article that we've talked about on this show, I think about 2 months ago. Anyway, so thread. BlackRock is buying every single family house they can find, paying 20 to 50% above asking price and outbidding normal home buyers. Why are corporations, pension funds, and property investment groups buying up all these homes?
Yeah, it actually was in April. We covered it then. Anna was on this story well before that. And she was sending me articles for months about this story and how outrageous it is. We've told you before why it's outrageous, and it involves both corporations blocking your ability to buy homes, driving up prices, locking you in as renters forever. But it also involves corruption, because they basically give campaign contributions to politicians so they can do their crony capitalism.
Right.
Now they discover it months later, and wait till you see the twist.
So JD Vance writes that BlackRock is pursuing an investment strategy that will make it harder for young Americans to own homes. The left will ignore this because BlackRock has committed to racial audits and other diversity BS. So he's arguing that the left is willing to kind of brush aside or turn the other cheek when it comes to corruption or really bad crony capitalism, as long as the corporations in question are engaging in identity politics. Except, look, here's the thing. There is this habit of conflating corporate Democrats with leftists, or the left, right?
Yes.
The left has been on it, but if you're criticizing corporate Democrats, I actually do agree with the criticism, because the housing market really became rigged against ordinary Americans under the Obama administration, as the Federal Reserve was using this strategy of qualitative easing, right? That's where the Federal Reserve wants to provide liquidity to banks and corporations. And so they offer incredibly cheap loans to these companies, right? So that has to do with the interest rates being insanely low. Private equity firms can borrow on the cheap, as you know, and then they take that money and they just buy up all this residential property, knowing that they can corner the market and be the top landlords, right? And you have no option but to rent from them eventually once they corner the market. That's what the whole strategy is.
And that way they get to build equity in the house and you don't, and that actually hurts the wealth of American families more than any single thing you can imagine. So now, this is how it breaks down. On the political spectrum, we have the left, who hates this and who's been pointing it out from the minute that it began. And it's a runaway capitalism, it's crony capitalism filled with corruption because of the campaign contributions, etc. It's the exact thing that we stand against. Then you have the corporate wing of the Democratic Party, who love it. And I agree with Anna, there's one thing JD Vance is right about, which is that the corporate Democrats use identity politics as a shield. Okay, yeah, BlackRock, go steal everybody's houses, right? And then pretend to do a racial audit, whatever that means. And so, oh no, and when the left criticizes, because before this, the right wing never criticized those corporations, never, right? So they would use their identity politics, ironically, against the left. So we would say, hey, wait a minute, Janet Yellen is helping to support this, and the corporate Democrats would scream, sexist! Can you believe they've criticized Janet Yellen because she's a woman?
No, perfect example was when Politico had published a story about Janet Yellen collecting millions and millions of dollars, giving Wall Street speeches 2 years prior to being nominated as the Treasury Secretary. That's relevant information for the American people to know, especially if she's been tapped to serve as the head of the Treasury Department. But the critique or the criticism coming from corporate Democrats was that it was sexist to ever talk about the earning power of a woman. No, it's not about her earning power. It's about how she made that money and how that could corrupt her in the position she's been tapped for.
And of course, it applies to Larry Summers, it applies to Tim Geithner, it applies to all these other men in the Democratic and Republican parties too. Now, and by the way, you know who patient zero on this is Hillary Clinton. So she got tons of campaign contributions from the banks and got direct checks from the banks for doing the same thing as Janet Yellen, going and giving speeches there. And when progressives criticized her for that, because she actually changed her vote on the bankruptcy bill and put tons of bankruptcy and loans and debts on you that you can't get rid of, so that she could please her banker donors. They said sexist, how could you, right? So there is that identity politics, but it is not played by the left. It's played by corporate Democrats, okay? Then you go to corporate Republicans, which is 99% of the politicians in the Republican Party. They are 100% in for the banks. And what they did, remember the 2008 bailout situation. The banks crashed the economy. What did the Republican politicians do? We got to give them trillions of dollars, okay? And then everybody's super mad. They start a Tea Party, a grassroots movement on the right, and they go, oh my God, I can't believe you bailed out all the banks. The politicians on the right, they gather up all those people and say, now go fight against Obamacare. Make sure you don't get health care for you or your family. But wait a minute, this started about the banks. Yet they didn't have a single protest at the banks.
They were also co-opted by the Koch brothers at the time.
100%, and by the financial industry, et cetera. So Republican politicians have always been pro-bank, pro-corporations, the worst of the crony capitalists. At least it's only 50 to 80% of the Democratic Party. It's 99% of the Republican Party. And obviously, as you can tell here, we're calling out both sides. Now, when you get to the end of the political spectrum and you have the right-wing grassroots, well, that's a mess. You know, so there's one upside, which is they hate corruption, okay? So I give them credit for that all the time. But the rest of it is just a hodgepodge of nonsense. They're like, banks are terrible and they're awesome. If the Libs don't like the banks, then I'm gonna own the Libs by giving all my money to the banks and make sure I don't have any wealth in my family. Because it's primarily driven by owning the Libs. It's driven by fear and hatred and loathing, et cetera, right? But if you stick with your core principle of hating corruption, hating crony capitalism, we could actually work together to fight the corporate goons in both parties.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about goons, you should think about people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, because not only is she a goon, she also has no idea what's going on or how anything works, how the system works, doesn't even know how various economic systems work. So her response to this was socialism. All the people excited over the fantasies of socialism that they consume from social media experts and members of Congress don't understand that there will be very few that own and control everything, and the rest of the population will be poor and under control. Except that's not how this works. If you decommodify the housing market, which by the way would never happen in this country, ever. But if you treat housing as a human right as opposed to a capitalistic commodity, then people would have homes to live under, because it's not thought of as a method of earning profit or making revenue, right? That's what the housing market is right now. That's the reason why you have private equity firms snatching up all of these single family homes, apartments, whatever they can. You even have, by the way, Blackstone. I just did a story on this for Jacobin Show Weekends. Blackstone is even buying up extended stay hotel chains because people have been priced out of the housing market, both when it comes to buying homes and also renting. And so they have no choice but to pay week to week in these extended stay hotels. And Blackstone's like, we want to corner that market too. We want to be their landlords too. They're buying up those hotel chains. They're also buying up literal trailer parks. They want to be this country's top landlord. They want to control that market wholeheartedly. They want a monopoly, and they're doing it right now, right before our very eyes.
And by the way, they're not just landlords, slumlords, because once they buy the house and you're renting it and you need something fixed, they're in New York. They're not going to come and fix your house. They're leaving people for months and years with a faulty house. And what are you going to do? They got an army of lawyers, and they own most of the politicians. There's nothing you could do. I mean, remember all those fake, phony politicians, both Republicans and Democrats, that told you home ownership is the most important thing. That's what builds wealth in this country. That's true. And now they turn around and go, No, we let BlackRock and Blackstone buy all the houses, and then you don't get to build any wealth for your family ever. And it doesn't matter if you're white, black, it doesn't matter. We're screwing all Americans for our corporate agenda. But look, even though it's super obvious, I just want to say one last thing about her claim of socialism. I drive some on the left crazy, but I still call myself a capitalist, right? But I know what socialism and capitalism is. And this ain't socialism. You'd have to be nuts to think this is socialism, where you help the top banks and financial companies in the world rip everybody off. That is the exact opposite of socialism. That doesn't make any sense at all. It's not even trying to make sense, right? And she might literally be the dumbest person, not in Congress, in America. Or she's a useful idiot for the banks, and she's like, oh yeah, slip me some money, I like it. It's all grift anyway, right?
She just, yeah, I mean, if she knows what's going on, I do think that money influences her. But I think in this particular case, she's just regurgitating what she's heard on Fox News, right? Fox News slaps the socialism label onto everything they dislike. And so she sees something she thinks is bad and she's like, this must be socialism. That's the extent of her thought process on analyzing different systems of government, different economic systems and what have you.
No, it's just profoundly unintelligent. She probably thinks Hugo Chavez fixed the system.
Totally, yeah.
So, but lastly, if you're in the right wing, okay, well then I got good news for you. We can work together. Now, if you want to prove how non-socialist you are, let's regulate those companies so they're not allowed to rip you off. By the way, you agree with regulation when it comes to cops, right? What is all crime? It's regulation. You are not allowed to rob a bank. You are not allowed to hit that guy in the face. That is a regulation. You could also do that with the banks. You're not allowed to hit my family in the face by buying all the homes and making me a permanent renter. I need the government to protect me when it comes to police and safety, fire department, etc. But also this. So let's go and limit these financial institutions to protect American citizens. Do you want to work on that together? Now, a lot of you in the right wing might go, maybe I'll look into that because I hate the corruption. But people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are not at all honest, will go, no, I will make sure there's no regulation of the top banks that are doing this. Okay, well then shut up about socialism because you're the heart of the problem. You're the one letting them get away with it in the first place. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.